What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
Today we're going to be talking about a four-letter word. Yeah, one of those. In corporate America, the word love is not one that's usually bandied about with favor. But our guest today, Kelly Hall, is developed an amazing message around the importance of love literally being part of corporate America, corporate strategy from a connection standpoint. And there's never been a more important time for us to talk about that than today, with this atmosphere of uncertainty that's going on and disunity that's taking place in not only in our companies, but also in society. So she's the author of a brand new book that's called Love Works. And I want to get the tagline here because it's really good. It's Love Works, Transforming the Workplace with Purpose and Authenticity. So Kelly, welcome. Nice meeting you.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what, I jokingly talk, you and I were talking about the fact that love's a four-letter word. And, what's been your experience as you launched this topic that you've been working on for a while, because it's part of who you are. What's the tension that you see that word sort of causes
There's a lot of tension.
in capitalism?
It's a loaded word. We all know, like, I've actually been told to stop using the word love at work or to not use the word love in a presentation at that particular moment in time. I was talking to investors in a private equity deal and in a management presentation. I was talking, our customer satisfaction was extremely high at this company. So I was talking about, like, this is love. Like, there's a really great respect and great exchange and long-term relationships with these customers. And it was unparalleled in my mind from all the research I'd ever seen done. And I was pulled aside and asked to stop using that word.
Mhm.
And I've
Yeah.
also had other friends who tried to launch initiatives inside of companies that had a overtone of love, like using the words know me, focus me, and care about me at work, KFC. We can't do that here. That's way too soft.
Mm.
And so I do know that there's a lot of tension, and it seems very scary to actually bring your emotions and bring your whole self to work. And that's a tragedy.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday in a coaching session, and comes out of the technology space, heavy engineering environment. And his whole premise was, say, we stay on KPIs, key performance indicators, and we need to move emotional response as much as we can so we can focus on task and making things happen. And I'm scheduling a second time to visit with him on that subject, so we can go and talk about this. Guess what? Engineers have emotions. you know,
Yeah.
it may not be
Well,
as.
you've probably seen that television show Severance, like
Mm-hmm.
if where you separate yourself into your person outside of work and your person at work, and the two shall never meet again. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
funny idea, right? Like, I think for years and years and years, we've had this stoic approach to work that sort of, and we've been taught about the hats we wear, your role as a mother, father, homemaker, parent, partner, your role as a daughter, your role as a worker, your role as an executive, your role as this, as if you're splitting your personality into all these different pieces and parts. I think that's old news, and those are old tapes, because the more and more that we invite people holistically to be themselves and create safe spaces for them to be themselves, we get the best of all the talent they have and all the energy they have and all the passion. And that is so much more meaningful and important than getting a slice of them that does work in a fine way really well consistently.
Yeah, yeah. You're reminding me. I gave a talk, one of my early ones. I was speaking to a group of accountants, controllers, chief financial officers, leading executives, and that's not my background. I'm a leadership guy, but I'm talking to people technically who knew a lot more than I did, and it was a little intimidating. And when I came home from giving the talk, my wife, Tommy, said, "How did it go?" And I said, "I think it's the best talk I've ever given." And
Oh,
she
wow.
said, and what I love about her, she didn't go, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." What she said was, "Why?" And the words that came out of my mouth, Kelly, were, "Because Mike showed up." And I went, and we talked about that. And ever since then, my prayer before I get it, let Mike show up. Let me be me,
Aw.
and not the, I went from Michael, is when I 21 years old got in the business world. It was Michael, right? And because it looked good on my business card, and it's I still remember the day she says, that's not you. You're not. That's stiff. That's, She goes, when's Mike going to come to work? And I went out and I got business cards made with Mike on it because I was trying to project this stiffness. And I love
Mhm.
this thing about authenticity. The more we can get to who we are, helps us to connect.
Well, I can tell a little bit of a story about an aha moment for me when I was working in the Netherlands and I was leading a venture inside of a really big chemical company. And they had so many wonderful and talented people all over the company. And it was just a pleasure to be part of their system. But Black Lives Matter was happening in the United States, and I was watching that with great interest because I had been such an advocate for female diversity and inclusion and really worked really hard to make sure half of our candidate slates for an open job were women. And my own team was 40% women, and I was really in leadership positions, not just staff jobs. And I was really proud of the progress that I had made with gender diversity. But through Black Lives Matter, I realized, gosh, I don't have very many brown and black people on my team. And so I started thinking more about that. And I felt really like a big failure. And I read How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I was really pushing myself to think more broadly about that. But I'd made a big assumption that it was easier to be black in Europe. So I went to one of the only black people that worked in our company and I was like, hey, I have a really odd question for you, but Black Lives Matter is really in my heart right now. And I was just wondering what it's like to be black in the Netherlands. And she goes, oh, honey, like we need to have a coffee. And I was like, I'll do better than that. I'll have you over to my apartment for, happy hour. So she came over for an hour and was telling me about what it's like. And I was like, oh my goodness, like these racial issues are everywhere. And it really touched my heart that no matter where you go, we have these stories that we're sort of trapped in about how different we are. But last time I checked, we're all spirits having a human experience and not the other way around. And this humanity, this humanness of separating ourselves into things we think keep us safe is utterly absurd. And so that made me think even more about how important it is to create safe spaces. And I asked her, like, well, why don't more people apply? Because I'd gone back to my own candidate slates, and we usually started with 75 to 100 candidates for jobs. Like my business there was a very popular venture in the circular economy, and we had a lot of applicants. But we didn't have very many applicants who weren't white. And I was like,
Hmm.
why? And she was like, we're not safe here. Like people don't respect our traditions and our voices and our unique ways of being. They want us to be like them. And there's better places for us to be ourselves. And I was like, that's tragic. We're missing out on all this talent and all this energy and all this diversity that when you bring it all to the table and you sort through it, that's where the magic happens. And so it became even 10 times more important to me after my happy hour with her to say, okay, I got to work 10 times harder to create psychologically safe spaces for everyone and to make sure we're inviting people to this party.
Yeah, the subject of psychological safety is coming up a lot right now,
Hmm.
both in the interviews I have and just in discussions. As leaders, what do we need to do to create psychological safety? Maybe the first thing to do is let's put some definitions on things today. In your mind, what is the definition of psychological safety? It sounds like it's a gestalt type word, and it's not.
Yeah, no, psychological safety is when you have the security in an environment to that where you'll be held through the highs and lows of it all. Like where you have the support around you to make mistakes and not be crucified and not be kicked out and not feel like your life is going to end when or you're going to be fired. And it's sort of, I think, an intentional effort to make sure people are at ease and in their comfort and stretch zones and not in their panic zones, knowing that if you get it just right, the name of the game is not to create this soft, cozy, perfect environment. It's to create a dynamic and supercharged environment that when people push each other around and they step on each other's toes, they have the tools to rebuild trust and to say they're sorry and to fix things that break instead of drama and chaos and cancer in the corners around the water cooler. So it's actually, it takes, that's that bridge between diversity and inclusion.
Hmm.
Inclusion takes a lot of expertise and a lot of wisdom to say, I'm going to let you be messy and I'm going to help you clean up your own messes after they happen because I don't want you to not be messy. I want you to be here with all of you.
Yeah, you said something really important in here, Kelly. It has to do with the fact of my job is not to make you comfortable. All right. Because what happens, growth only comes with discomfort. So as a
Hmm.
leader, I have to create an environment that, though, there's a difference between stretch zone and panic zone.
Right. Thank
Uh,
you, Simon Sinek.
yeah, yeah. Is that where you got that from? I have to go look that up. But it's
He's one of the
awesome.
first people who said it really well. I'm sure it's been there a long time, but he describes it really well.
Yeah, and it speaks to me because of the fact we don't have time to go into great detail on it, but I spent about 12, 13 years of my life where I had massive panic attacks. I was agoraphobic.
Mm.
And so, I mean, this whole
Okay.
subject of getting to a place where I could go and be uncomfortable and still be functional was, man, it was talk about a learning journey I had to go through on this. And as a leader, our job is to stretch our people because when somebody is being stretched and they live up to it, wow, they get such a high sense of purpose, don't they?
Yeah, and I can bring that back to love because when I look back to the people that I had the coolest relationships with over the course of my career, they were the people that gave me stretch assignments and where I could also feel their hand on my back that they knew I could more than I knew that I could. Like
Hmm.
there's several stories in my book where I reference people like Mike Johansson and Margaret Dano and Helen Metz and other people who on those days when I was young and they would say, you make the decision. I'd be like, no, I'm just going to give you all the data and the analysis and the recommendation. They're like, no, you pull the trigger. And I would hold my breath and I was like, okay. But when you do, even if that was a bad decision and they let you live with the consequences, you're learning at light speed.
Hmm.
But that feeling of having someone's hand on your back, whether you helping you lean forward, catching you when you start hesitating. Like that's a damn powerful hand. And that
That's
is
huge.
love.
Yeah, huge. And so let's do this, okay? That's I'm into definitions today for some reason.
Okay,
But I think it's important because when we see the word love, a lot of times where the brain goes, it goes to romance.
sure. Or
And so
sex.
what I want to do is in a capitalistic and a corporate environment, let's define from your perspective, what is the word love?
Okay. I used to have some messed up relationships with love, which are also in my book, but I have come to understand love as our essential life force, like that magical part of our breath and our heartbeat that flows between people in relationship. It's the good stuff. The Dutch have this word called gezellig, and that means it doesn't have a great English translation, but the closest I can get is as it should be. And I believe in our life, the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our existence. And so when you have love flowing as it is supposed to be flowing, it's abundant and never ending and it's just this beautiful, beautiful flowing energy that it is the energy in our relationships. It's love.
Yeah.
And love doesn't hurt. Hurt hurts. Love never hurts. Love is only good.
Mm-hmm.
What we do with it as humans can be edgy or manipulative or whatever, but that's not love. That's manipulation. That's not
Mm-hmm.
love. That's romance. That's not love. Love is the simple, simple life force that is the magic in our relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wrote this down as you were talking is that I wrote love equals being valued.
Yeah, it
Uh,
does. Like sometimes people say, "Oh, Kelly, like there's this tension between love and power." And I was like,
mhm.
love is power.
Yeah.
Like the more that you actually care about your customers and your employees and even your investors, like your neighbor, the stranger behind you, the more that you just let that love flow around you and you wouldn't believe the things that come back to you tenfold.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's
Because if you take the
utterly
word love, we can,
gorgeously beautiful.
yeah, you can soften it up to make it more acceptable. But love means care, concern. Uh, and so when I use those words, it doesn't cause things to ripple. But I love the depth of love because that's special. That means that
Mhm.
I'm going to interact with you at a much deeper level than the person I'm just standing next to on the street at a stop sign waiting for, the light to change me across the street.
Yeah, well, it's because I see your grace. I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like you know that you're powered by your spirit too. You're not,
Hmm.
your spirit isn't tucked away on Sunday mornings.
No, no, not at all. It's that center. It's what's interesting is that did some studies on the it's called the locus of control.
Mm,
Which is it's an old Greek term. Locus isn't it's center of being. And what happens is we
mhm.
have this, the Greek philosopher, the center of being is it internal or external? And external is my life is dictated by my circumstances or situation. Internal locus is it's dictated by me and the steps that I take and what I do and how do I respond as opposed to react. And
Right.
so
It's harder than it looks, isn't it?
yeah, so we want that internal that internal, but we do have a and the
Well,
closer we can make that and give that depth, I mean, understand what that is. I think the
Well, I
better.
want to just, I think that that idea of separate, creating that pause and that space between reacting and responding, that's exceptionally good for people who have that control and who have that discipline.
Hmm.
But I also want to respect our emotions because I don't think we're letting people feel all of their emotions. And I had a really beautiful person in my life once who was a coach, and she said, your emotions are like a piano. If there's 88 emotions, like the keys on a piano, you're not going to play very good music if you don't navigate the sharps and flats and learn to feel all of your emotions in your body and all of your emotions in your life because they're just information. They're
Hmm.
there to serve you, they're there to help you navigate when you don't feel the way you like to feel. It's just information.
Yeah.
And so like I had many years of not feeling very many emotions. I was sort of always trying to be positive and always trying to be optimistic and really avoiding the dis-ease. And then
Hmm.
when that caught up with me after two very serious cancer diagnoses, I realized, oh my gosh, look, I got to start tucking that shit away. I
Hmm.
actually need to feel it and express it and release it and work with it. And it's amazing how then that led to me being an absolute opponent of dis-ease. Once I got rid of the dis-ease in my body and my life, my career now is helping distress teams in toxic environments to get rid of the distress and dis-ease in their work because there's no place for it. Nothing good
Hmm.
happens when we're in fear and anxiety. And sadly, in our lives these days, there's just more and more of it.
It really is. And so, as I mentioned, the journey that I went into where I was fighting the disease, I had a very wise person who became a very good friend of mine. It cost me 120 bucks an hour at that stage to make him a friend because he was my therapist. But Rob and I started running together and dropped the paycheck and just spent time together. But it was really interesting. We were talking about the fact that as human beings, we can't control our first thought. In other words, when something happens, we can't control our first thought. And so that fear thought that pops in, you can't say, don't think that. But he said, but you can control your second. And so what
Yeah.
happens is when that first thought mine was, well, what if this happened? Well, I would go into a really unproductive space. I would cower. I would back up. I would hide. I would not leave my room. I would not go across a bridge. I mean, all these things. Wouldn't climb in an elevator. And uh, and the second thought would be, oh my God, what if I have a panic attack? Well, I had to replace it with the second thought of, well, so what? And as soon as I did that, then
Mhm.
the emotion came down to more productive. And that's what we're
Yeah,
talking
I have to
about.
remind
Yeah.
I have to remind myself frequently to not be hijacked by my emotions and to recognize when I am in my emotions. And maybe your coach was a mentor or a friend to my
Hmm.
coach, but she was much more colorful. And she used to say that when you get a wave of emotions, it's like taking a hit off of a joint, and you don't get to decide when you're not high anymore. You have to
Hmm.
wait until those chemicals are through your system and have been replaced by the cleansing your body naturally does in order to be back at your homeostasis. And so I don't know that for myself, but it was a funny thought. And I was just like, it kind of is true. You know, when
Hmm.
you have a really big emotional response to something, your body's flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, and it's trying to give you that fight or flight response. Something's not right. Something's not right. But it's sort of like, okay, having the discipline and the patience and the coaching and support to feel that hand on your back of someone who loves you or your love for yourself to breathe and go, what am I going to do with all this feeling?
Yeah.
What am I going
Yeah,
to
that's
do?
it.
Why are you here? What am I supposed to be learning right now?
And
It's
learn
pretty
how to let
powerful
go
stuff.
let go of the hijack. When
Yeah.
that wave is coming at you and you're trying to control it, just as soon as you let it go, what happens? It hits an apex and it starts coming down again. So, especially
It's
with
just
what we're,
energy.
yeah, it just is. I was working with somebody who was, again, comes from the technology space. It was a leader. And we're talking about the fact that people on their team were really, responding very emotionally to things. And you mentioned this earlier. That's why I want to make sure I came back to it because you said something, especially for those of us who are real data driven. That we're real data driven, and I use behavioral assessments in the work I do. I use the DISC model,
Oh, yeah, I
the
love it.
everything DISC, and I love it because what it does, it puts people into these sort of task business oriented mindsets and relationship mindsets. And what's interesting is that I said, do you recognize that emotional response is just data? She went, what do you mean?
Hmm.
I said, it's just data. Because there's a reason for the emotional response. It's giving you a clue. Your job now is to get curious, not
Right.
condescending. All right? Get curious, not condescending. I need to write that down. Don't forget that. Uh,
It's a
but
new
you
chapter
seem
for
to
your
have,
next book.
yeah, you seem to have a really curious nature to yourself as far as human interaction.
Oh,
And
well, it's hard one because I was that jerk, that logic only data driven finance person earlier in my life, like where I found a lot of comfort in the other nerds like me that just loved talking about like we met in the trenches to get into the work and create good things together. And when you're with a lot of like-minded people, you find great comfort in the way that you kind of process information the same way. Like, if you've done Myers-Briggs or DISC, like you'll find out that your personality profile is like 5% of the population. Then you find yourself working with the other people in the 5%, and it's really cozy and comfortable. But then I got passed over for a promotion and I was like, what? Like, I got to be the best person for that job. And like, no, the people think that you're a jerk. And I was like, what do you mean? And so I was blessed to get a coach and to really start learning about empathy and learning about asking questions more often and learning about truly taking an interest in the human I'm sitting across from instead of jumping straight into the work every single time. And the funny thing is, the more and more that I embrace that, my world like went from black and white and rows and columns to Technicolor, you know, Wonderland. And it's really funny.
Mhm.
Like I've always enjoyed my career. I've been very, very blessed. But having those opportunities to be around people who really believed in development and the fact that like the disc profile shows you your biases. It shows you
Yeah.
your nurture and nature coming together at this point in your life. But it also reminds you you have all of these things inside of you and you can flex your muscles
Mhm.
whenever you want to meet someone in a different place or to respect them or call on them, enroll them. And so like the more that I actually had all that support to start playing with connecting differently and slowing down sometimes and pausing, it was just kind of like everything got more fun. My work got more fun, my relationships got more fun, my home got more fun. Like everything got better when I started letting myself care and love more.
Yeah, I've got all these thoughts floating through my mind. I'm trying to, not forget about it, but you just said something that's really important right now. Everything that you and I are talking about, we're talking about capitalism and corporate America, whatever, but everything we're discussing has equally, if not even more importance in our home life, because
Yeah.
it's about relationship. Home is
Hmm.
about relationship and work is about relationship. And
Yeah.
I think that the challenge that we sometimes run into is that as we, we we get judged and we judge ourselves and we early on in our career we get started by doing effective. How much can we do? How much can we do? And what sounds like you did is you got to a stage where you shifted your mindset from what are you doing to how do you make the people around me more effective, more capable, stretch along those lines in.
Yeah,
Thanks for
maybe.
joining us today on Lighting the Path Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility, it's an honor.